So, are you telling me that microphone's been picking up? Oh, that's nice. Oh, yeah, that's.
Hey. Are you running this?
Both me and Patrick.
You guys give us the flag. Just put them up here. Put images on the board.
Yeah. So, speaker, can you guys hear us okay?
You don't understand that.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I think we'll get started. We're a little bit late. It's 1:36 in the afternoon. Today is Thursday, September 22nd.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, today is Thursday, September 22nd, 2022 is 1:37 in the afternoon, and this is a special open meeting of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And we will proceed with our agenda. However, this meeting was called to address resource adequacy issues for investor-owned utilities. So we'll proceed. Our first item on the agenda is a call to order and roll call. Taking roll.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'll take the roll today.
Okay, thank you, Hans.
Commissioner Fishman,
Present.
Commissioner Byrd,
I'm a present.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Here.
Commissioner Hall,
Here.
and Commissioner Maestas.
I'm here.
Madam Chair, all commissioners are present for today's meeting. With a full quorum, we can proceed.
Thank you. Okay, now we have the pledge of allegiance. Would you like to do the pledge?
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I can't outdo Commissioner Byrd on that, but I can ask him to do the state pledge.
I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the sea symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
All right, I understand there, poor quality from the Fisher's microphones. Can you want to just do it a little closer?
Yeah.
Here you go.
It's kind of like
Over here.
it should capture.
I mean, solving the problem. All right, now we have consideration and approval of the agenda, and I would note we were looking at an amended agenda from the one that was sent out Friday. There's minor changes. Any comments about the agenda? Anybody want to make any additional changes?
Madam Chair, I would like to move the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Assuming there's no further discussion, we'll have a vote.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, is the motion is to move the agenda as amended, is that correct?
Correct. The amended, it was, the amended agenda we see on the screen.
Take the roll. Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The agenda is approved as amended.
Wait, this is the chair.
Yeah, I think Patrick can switch the view over to the amended agenda, Patrick.
Right, this is not the amended agenda. This is not the amended agenda on the screen. All right, we're on item number 4, entitled Workshop Summer 2023-24 Resource Adequacy pursuant to docket 21-00159. And have sort of an agenda within an agenda here. The first item is the introduction and overview of commission concerns. And I believe Commissioner Houston is prepared to talk about that.
Well, yeah, I'll just take a second. I know we run into issues with PNM, with resource adequacy, particularly with closing of San Juan. And we've all gotten a little boxed in because of it. And resource adequacy for 2023 summer and 2024 is going to be a challenge. And we've had,
But I believe we're not going to talk about changes.
yeah, we're not talking about cases, I'm just talking general. And I know that I've had lots of questions from constituents because there's been press about it. They don't feel that they necessarily understand what's going on there, and certainly they'd like some clarity. Frankly, we thought it would be a good idea if the commission had a meeting where these issues were kind of openly discussed, and the public could feel like all the issues were on the table. But then additionally, because of some of our due process constraints, we've been meeting with PNM every other week, trying to keep track of what's going on in terms of catching up with the issues and protecting customers. But because of ex parte issues, because of potential documents being created in the future, the communication hasn't been direct with the commission. So people are kind of walking around with different concepts in their heads about what's going on. So we thought it'd be a great idea to have a meeting where everyone could kind of do it in a workshop format. We could all talk openly, all get on the same page, voice any concerns, and then at the same time, inform stakeholders of the public, and give stakeholders obviously an open forum to raise issues and their concerns. So that's what we're trying to do here today.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fishman, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Commissioner Maestas if he wanted to say anything. He was the commissioner who initially opened up the supply chain docket and combined it with resource adequacy docket, and Loski and Commissioner Fishman have been working on this topic. So Commissioner Maestas, Vice Chair Maestas, is there anything you'd like to say in addition about our overview and objectives here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me?
Very well.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to thank everyone for participating today. In my opinion, this is an important effort, a collective effort to help secure the state's energy security in the near future and bring, I think, what Commissioner Fishman alluded to is much needed transparency and cooperation among all the parties involved in meeting our state's electricity needs. At the beginning of the year, as chairman, I pushed to begin holding weekly internal resource adequacy meetings in response to concern regarding utility filings on replacement resources and resource adequacy, as well as to the challenges arising from pandemic-related global supply chain breakdowns. Those weekly meetings were moved to every other week as the year progressed, and as the issues surrounding summer peak for this year clarified and solutions were reached. But those meetings continue even now as we turn our attention to not just next year's peak, but to peak 2024 as well. So it's my hope that not only are we protecting the lives and livelihoods of New Mexicans, but also setting the table for the next commission to continue this work hand in hand with the state's utilities and co-ops into the future. And don't worry, co-ops, I know you're not included in this, but we'll be coming around to include you as well. While we see some utilities, may be bogged down in contractual and legal problems that seem to keep tripping them up, we also see other utilities creatively moving forward, finding options, and working to expedite solutions. And solutions are what we are here to find. Two heads, or in this case, many heads, are better than one. And so I call on utilities, interveners, stakeholders, and commissioners to commit to working together, increasing transparency, and fostering cooperation. Today, though, we're here to roll up our sleeves and get to work. The time to fish or cut bait is past. The time for fear-mongering and finger-pointing has passed with it. And now it's time to move forward with real solutions to meet our state's resource adequacy challenges. This workshop builds on our previous work on resource adequacy and is yet another step forward in the right direction. Thank you all, and let's get to work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mayeska. Our next item is asking utilities to provide their overview of challenges. And I'd like to ask whoever wants to go first. I see Mark Benton indicating he would like to, so we'll have CNN go first. And this just will be a review of what your challenges are going forward for the next couple of years here.
Okay.
Or whatever you'd like to tell us in terms of your challenges, what have to do with research adequacy.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Great to see you all in person. It's been a while since I've seen all of you at a commission meeting, so it's really good feeling. I think this workshop, I should introduce myself. I'm Mark Fenton. I'm the Executive Director of Regulatory Policy and Case Management at PNN. And in terms of this workshop or special meeting, we think it's great. I was really glad to talk to Commissioner Fishman ahead of time and said we were really glad that you set up this meeting. I think it's a good opportunity for us to talk to you, answer your questions, let you know what we're doing. So we're looking really forward to this.
Terrific to see you here, but I wish you got the haircut before you came.
I'm
just not used to seeing all this.
Yeah, it's got a little longer. But before we start, I'd kind of like to lay out who we brought today and what our thoughts are for the workshop as well. First, I'd like to thank the commission. I don't think this is inappropriate at all. It's right along what we're doing today in terms of collaboration. But I'd like to thank the commission. Recently, we had a 150 megawatt energy storage battery. We had an amendment to that battery related to some previously approved Palo Verde resources. And we filed that amendment, and there wasn't any objections. Commissioner Fishman had some questions about it. And we got it on the agenda immediately. And the commission talked about it at an open meeting. You didn't have any objections, it got accepted, and it's a resource we're going to be able to use for 2024. So that's the kind of collaboration. One of the challenges is getting timely approval. We really appreciate your efforts for the amendment. So I'd like to say that we are going to have other amendments. We have other replacement resources that we've had difficulties with, and we're going to have more amendments coming to the commission with changes. So that kind of collaboration going forward, we appreciate. We've been working with the stakeholders. One of the things the commission did early on is ask us to host bi-weekly meetings. We've had 15 days bi-weekly meetings. We were focused primarily on 2022 early on. Everybody was concerned about 2022 as we were. We're past that. We just had a bi-weekly meeting 2 days ago, last Tuesday. We're getting very good attendance at those meetings. Staff is always at the meeting. The Attorney General is there. Several stakeholders, I won't name them all, but we usually have anywhere from 15 to 30 people talking about resource adequacy. So those meetings have been, I think, very good. We transition now to 23 and 4. Continue to talk about that. We just provided them an update at our last meeting on Tuesday. In terms of today, there's 2 agenda items planned. One was utility challenges. We brought Carter Cherry. Carter is our director of supply chain. So we thought for that agenda item, we would have Carter talk about what's going on with supply chain. I know Commissioner Maestas was wanting an update on supply chain. And then there's another agenda item. It's continuous. There's an item in between, so we can have someone talk about that when the agenda item comes up. But we've also got Tom Falgren. Tom is on the line. He's our principal generation advisor. He's formerly our vice president of generation. He's here today, and he's prepared to walk you through where we are in 2023 and 2024 and what we're looking forward to for 23 and 4. So he can do it right after Carter, or we can wait till the agenda item. So both of those are available. And then in terms of, you also had a lot of other agenda items. So we thought this workshop was a great idea. We wanted to make sure we had the right people here to talk with you. So I'm just looking at my notes here so I don't forget who all we have. We have Nick Phillips. Nick is our Director of Integrated Resource Planning. He is in the middle of an IRP right now and hosting public advisory meetings. So he's here. He can talk about IRP issues if they come up. We have Zach Johnson. Zach is our Manager of Energy Efficiency. He runs our energy efficiency programs and well, I don't own the programs, but he manages the regulatory filings associated with them. Very familiar with our demand response programs. He's also been involved in a group where we've been looking at some interruptible rate items. So he's available today too. We have Manuel Sanchez, who's our Director of Power Operations. Manuel, sometimes it looked like it was on your agenda item. You have a lot of questions about curtailment plans. What if something happens? How would that work? Manuel's the guy for that. We have Stacy Goodwin with us, Chief of Safety General Counsel. We always need to have a attorney in the room, just in case. And then on the phone or on Zoom, I mentioned Tom Falgren. We also have Ray Sandoval. There's an agenda item to talk about communications and how we would communicate if curtailment issues did happen. Ray's prepared to talk about that. He should be on the line. And we also have Stella Chan, who we do have an interruptible rate today, rate 8. Stella's prepared to talk about that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carter to talk about supply chain real quick.
Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for meeting with us. And I will try to keep this brief, but by all means, if you have questions or want to do deeper on something now or later, just let me know.
I would say just keep it loud enough for people who don't seem to be able to hear too well. You said, oh, okay, so now nothing can be heard.
Mark, let's switch chairs.
Oh. Thank you for keeping us informed, Camilla. let's know, is this any better? Let's let the gentleman talk.
It's better.
Thank you. Okay, great, thank you. Really quickly on supply chain at a, what I would call a macro level. The issues are continuing today. You can start with COVID. Yes, the president said that the pandemic is over, but the effects of the pandemic are far from being over. We're still seeing that anything from locally to worldwide, and it's impacting things as disparate as workforce availability, crews that are available or not available to do work. Manufacturers are being unable to retain staff or to attract new staff. And it's also occurring not just in the United States, it's occurring worldwide. Parts of China have gone on lockdown again. Big challenges are a result of that. We're still seeing additional products that are coming from China, or in some cases, components coming from China and raw materials that are not making it to the States or to the other manufacturing or assembly facilities in a timely manner. Going from that to the impacts of the interest rates, what's going on with that, driving prices up. We've got the issues that are going on with the dock workers, and thank goodness there was resolution on the potential rail strike. Hopefully that will hold and won't come back and bite us again later. So we're seeing delivery issues, availability of truck drivers, and just point for those that may not be aware of that. About 6 months ago, maybe not quite that long ago, there was a article, I believe it was in the Dallas Morning News, about truck drivers and availability for the oil areas in the West Texas. They were offering $700,000 a year for a truck driver that was willing to haul sand every day. $700,000 a year. That's what local delivery companies and long-haul delivery companies are competing with to get truck drivers. So we're seeing delivery costs really, really going through the roof.
So when we leave the commission at the end of the year, okay.
Yes. So it was a shocking number. And maybe it was a one-off, but at any rate, the dynamics of today for the workforce are very different than it's been, at least in my working lifetime. I've been at this for 40 plus years. The next component or piece that I would talk about is, so what does all of this mean to us as a utility? Prices are up. Just one example, price for a 25 kVA transformer, so larger pad mount distribution transformer, has gone up 77% this year, from roughly $800 to over $1,400 per unit. Unbelievable price increases. Availability of those products, very, very constrained. We've had manufacturers come to us and say, we're going to put you on allocation. We're going to give you half of what your normal and requested volume is for the next year. Luckily, we were able to overturn that one, and we got a commitment for continuing volume going forward, but this is only to repeat this year's activity, not any additional activity from next year. We're seeing similar with other manufacturers. Lead times, unbelievable impact on lead times. One example, conductor has gone from 32 to 72 weeks for an order, if they will take your order. And we're getting manufacturers that are refusing to take orders from certain utilities. If you're not a preferred customer, they simply aren't going to deal with you. And we're seeing that.
You say 72 to begin with?
No, it was 32 to begin with, and they're 72 now. And we're seeing similar activity across the board with materials and equipment. And unfortunately, everyone focuses or tends to focus on the big equipment because it's visible, everybody understands what it is, but it's really the smaller things that can put us behind the 8 ball on projects and just ongoing work. One of the most recent issues that we've had has been with simply a splice to be able to put the cable together before we bury it underground. And the manufacturers, another impact of the current economy, if it's a low margin product, low margin manufacturing line, they're simply shutting down. 2 manufacturers of that splice in the United States, 3M one of them, they're shutting down that line. We've got to find an alternate. So there's a lot of challenges that continue. Tom will talk about the impact on the generation side in a few minutes, but we're also seeing from the supply base that they are not able to obtain the materials and equipment either. We've seen that with everything from battery storage components to solar panels, and we've got ongoing issues with tariffs and concerns about are there forces at play where they're trying to manipulate the system, and not us or anything directly, but certain manufacturers, with the film on the panels and stuff. So there's a lot of issues, but again, we can dive deeper as you guys would decide.
That seems comprehensive to me. Anybody want to hear anything more?
Well, just a couple of questions. Anything in the new federal legislation that helps you target some of these supply chain issues?
Not today, but there could be some downstream. There's a lot of activity going on with the tariffs and what's on, what's out. A big topic of discussion right now across the industry and with Washington is the manufacturing capability that we do not currently have for power transformers, and what can be done to entice companies to restart those lines, to build a plant or something. But those are long-term fixes. They're not near-term fixes.
And in terms of the duration of these issues, no one knows, obviously, but do you have any kinds of, range of how long these issues might continue?
My peers and I around the country have a monthly, from EEI sponsored monthly conference call, and it's a question that gets asked quite a bit. What's the crystal ball look like? And it ranges from there's nothing wrong. I think I heard that once in the last 2 years. I don't think that person's in that position anymore. To nothing is going to go back to normal for 3 to 5 years. And it seems pretty consistent that everyone's saying 3 years, it may stabilize, 5 years to return to what we would have considered normal 2 to 3 years ago. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than that. I think 5 years is maybe the new normal, and I don't think we're going to go back to the prior normal, probably within the 7 to 10 years.
So when I hear that, would it be correct to say that as we're looking at near-term solutions, we better be setting ourselves up in a way that prepares us for the medium term, meaning out 5 years?
Yes.
But if we don't, then we might be just setting up the next emergency.
Yeah, and that good point, good question. And one thing that we are doing, many other utilities I think are doing as well, is we are really paying attention to our planning cycle and forecasting cycle, and we're extending the time periods for that. We're currently releasing purchase orders for deliveries in 2024.
Say that again.
Releasing purchase orders now for product deliveries in 2024, and in some cases 2025 because of lead times. So we're having to plan that far in advance just to be able to get the equipment that we're planning on putting into a project or continuing work at that point in time.
Okay, and prior to that, you didn't have to plan that far ahead.
Correct.
Okay. So that's good. So at least you're looking at 2024, which is the time frame of this. So,
And just to be clear, I'm talking about normal equipment, not resource adequacy. So Mr. Falgren will cover that. So I'm talking about specifically materials and equipment that we purchase and consume.
So we've got Tom for resource adequacy 2023 and 4, but it looked like you had an item before, so yeah, we'll sit down, let other utilities talk, but we do have Tom queued up for the next item.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, so which utility would like to go next? El Paso Electric or Southwest Power Service? I leave it up to you. Thank you. That's El Paso Electric.
And can everyone hear us? Because I thought that was a little bit hard to hear. Is this the better seat to?
I assume so. That's the line.
Oh, here's our mic. Okay, because I got a couple messages and it was a little hard to hear also. So, okay,
So I guess that means we all have to yell.
well, I speak loud, so I'm good.
You have to.
I have to yell.
That's it. There you go.
Tell my husband that. Okay.
So, good afternoon. My name is Nancy Burns. I'm the Deputy General Counsel with El Paso Electric Company. And it's very nice to be invited here today to participate in this workshop. With me is in the room is Dave Hawkins. We both came up from El Paso this morning. He is our VP of. No, I'm gonna know what it is. He's the VP. I wrote it down. It's changed several times. Operations and research strategy. So basically, that's who we have in the room here today. And Dave will be addressing the utility challenges. We also have a few people online with us, and I've gotten messages that they are online. We've got Rico Gonzalez, he's New Mexico VP. He did not make the trip with us this morning. We have just in from James Schiestel. I was trying to get him. So he's our VP of Regulatory Affairs and Government Affairs. He's on. We have Crystal Enoch with our Energy Efficiency Department, and Anagina Soto with Load Research. So the way that we plan to structure our conversation with you today is just to make some opening remarks. Dave can present a little bit on some challenges. We do not have a supply chain person to present or answer questions today. And then we'll come back and Dave can present, and some other people online can present on the other issues. But I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm really happy that this discussion is going on. I hear from PNM that they're having a lot of public resource adequacy meetings, and they have very good attendance, and I think that's great. But from my perspective, working for El Paso Electric Company for the last 7, almost 8 years now, is that I think that if there's a resource adequacy issue going on in the state with one utility, it's not only the state's issue, but it's the other utilities issue also. I think if any issue impacts any one of us or the co-ops, it impacts everybody, because the utilities, every utility works together to try to keep the lights on for the other utilities. And so I think it's really great that you're bringing all the utilities together. And from my point of view, because I'm not a technical person, and I know there are a lot of technical challenges and issues going on, and I don't think they're getting more difficult. I think they're always been difficult. I think the utilities work itself is very challenging and dynamic, and there's a lot of really amazing people that work at the utilities that have very specialized knowledge. And so I think from my point of view, one of the biggest issues that we all face, besides just the work that we do every day, is a communication issue. And I think it's really important for us as the utilities to try to be as clear as we possibly can with our communications about the issues that are facing us. And I don't think that the litigation forum is a great forum for that. I think a lot of things get lost in it. So I just feel from my point of view, communication is really important. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come here today. And I hope that it continues. And I hope that it continues in forums where we're brought together, because I do think it's a state issue. So
I appreciate those comments, Ms. Burns, and we all, I think, well, I don't know. I'm not sure I can speak for everybody on the commission, but I know I can speak for myself, and I have a strong feeling that Commissioner Fishman and Commissioner Maestas certainly feel that way, because it was their idea to do this, and you know, sometimes we're so constrained in what we can actually say to each other in a litigation scenario. It's just impossible. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because we want to know what's going on. I'm sure you'd like to tell us in a way that won't get them in trouble. So.
right, in a way that's that makes sense and it's understandable, because you know it takes a long time for certain topics to be clear if you're not the subject matter expert. I mean, it's taken me years to learn different pieces, and so that's why it's really exciting that we have different people, different subject matter experts they're on, they're participating, and hopefully it can continue. So Dave, it's not all on you today.
That's all right. I didn't know I'd be doing this part of this until Nancy said, come on up. But
David, can you move this?
Sure.
I got one. Like that.
no, thank you very much for having us, and good to see you all and be in front of you all today. I agree with much of what PNM has said about supply chain issues. From my standpoint, it's more on the resource adequacy issue, but sitting around the table, I hear the issues that we have in connecting new loads to our system, the wait time to connect new loads to our system. And it's been a new adventure for our transmission and distribution groups to deal with these challenges they haven't had to face before, and to be creative in how do we use transformers that we have set aside, knowing we have storms that come up in the summer and that we will be replacing transformers versus customers that want to connect and have been waiting for months at a time. So that is a new challenge for us, and it's elbows, right? Who's hurt? I mean, you get down to the lower level and I just think an elbow, what's an elbow? I mean, we should be able to get that, but small things like that are setting us back that you just don't think of.
What is an elbow?
And I think it was described earlier, but for us, the elbow is when we're connecting loads through these ground pad mounted transformers. We're taking this wire that comes in overhead, and attaches to an elbow and goes into the transformer, and that connection to serve the wires to the transformer is something that's difficult to get right now, as is three-phase transformers. We've got what they call single-phase transformers for homes, but very difficult to get three-phase transformers for larger loads. I'm going to move beyond supply chains. I don't know if I can do any better than what was said earlier. From our standpoint, we have an older generation fleet. We have an older transmission system in regards to, we still have wooden poles that bring 345 kV transmission lines. And from what I've heard, I think we may be the only utility that uses wooden poles for that type of voltage coming in. So they've held up well, except for with lightning strikes or something to that event. And we've dealt with that this summer, a fire on a transmission pole. And it takes our crews 3 to 4 hours to drive up there with a pole, change it out. That's a value that's hard to quantify, to say, okay, let's change out wood for steel. I mean, that's fairly expensive. And so if you decide you live with what you have, there's a certain amount of pain that could happen from that hasn't really happened to this point, but that's an exposure for us. We have, and I've been told it's it's a greater emphasis to say Eisenhower era generation versus 1950s, 1960s generation. Hopefully it's more impactful to you when I say Eisenhower. But, you know, we have been trying to, it's something we would like to be able to retire that generation. But load has grown for us. Continues to grow beyond what we project. We went out for our IRP in 2018, which developed a plan to bring in resources for 22, 23. We're already behind that load. So even when we get those resources in, we're still chasing load. So there's discussions, do you build for your projected load, or do you build for that high range in your projection? Those are some of the discussions, because we're always playing catch up.
What were those choices for projected load or what?
Well, so when we do a projected load, we have a load that's sort of in that 50-50 area. You can go higher, you can go lower in ranges under certain circumstances. As a utility, we've gone for that projected average load right in the middle. If you project higher, there's some risk that you've overbuilt, and there's scrutiny involved with that. But we have been playing catch up in recent years on our IRPs. Communication, I agree with Nancy. For us, if it's engineers dealing with engineering problems, and we tell Nancy, if we got this and we need to get this in, and here's why, it's like no one's going to understand that. It's a communication on telling our story. Why do we need what we're asking for? Because it's easy to say NERC standards, or it's easy to say, you know, anything along those lines. But if you can't tell your story, the message isn't really seeping through. So I would agree with communication as well. I think that's all really that we have as far as the challenges that we see at this point, and then more prepared to talk about specifics and resource adequacy and other issues.
Okay, well, thank you for keeping it straight.
Just a
Yes,
quick-
Chair Fisher, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick comment. A lot of suggestions from the utilities on, you know, we went through COVID, and, you know, the government did a number of things to help get vaccines out there, get masks available, blah, 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 blah. You know, it makes me wonder if there are things in the supply chain, certain critical things that the government could provide similar kinds of support. And, you know, I don't know if you guys have given thought to that. I'm sure somebody has. But certainly, you know, I'd be open, and I think the whole commission probably, to, you know, hearing ideas and, you know, very likely supporting them. So just invite all the utilities to be creative, and if you have some thoughts.
Wonder, I know Rico, I don't know if you're on the line. I know you've been involved in some of those discussions, at least, or have you?
Well, we have a very creative
Yeah.
utility.
Yeah. So we may be able to.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioners, Rico Gonzalez with El Paso Electric. We have been part of some of those conversations on a federal level, Commissioner Fishman. There is some thought about moving to using the WARS Act, if you will, for transformers and the like. But as far as I understand, that's where it stayed, is inside of a conversation. It hasn't been something that has moved forward from there. And that, I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
So I would just invite a partnership on that with the commission. If you guys got kind of ideas.
Are you getting into the discussion part of all
No, I just, I'll just stop right there.
this? But think it, hold that thought.
Madam Chair,
Yes. Commissioner DeSantis.
I just want to make a comment. They did their presentation of Paso Electric, and to hear exactly what your challenges are. I think it's a clear understanding that the commission we need to refocus. And when you are planning to build energy storage or energy related projects, and we learned about it a year ago in 2021. We should have already started workshops a year ago, but today is a good time to hear about, you know, the challenges that the utility companies are facing. And the other part that I like to convey to everybody is that if you can give us, send us an email with all your topics that you have talked about before the commission today. That way, you know, I like to review them and to ask more questions down the road. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McDowell. So let's move on to Southwest Power Service to present their challenges. Before we get into discussion. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Channel.
Thank you. Madam Chair and Commissioners, thanks for having us today. Hopefully I can speak loud enough. I'm not a loudspeaker, so I'll probably feel like I'm yelling. I have a handout that I just wanted to leave with you all, if that's okay. And I think my team's working on getting an emailed PDF version for the screen or other
Okay.
distribution.
That's
So,
fine. I'm happy to see it.
it's not necessarily an overview of our challenges. It's really just an overview of our system and our capacity position. Given today's, the focus of today's workshop on our capacity position in 23 and 24. So on the back of this handout is just a general map of our generation fleet in terms of where the units are located in our service territory. There's an indication here if it's owned generation or if it's a purchased resource. So y'all can review that at your leisure. On the front page, I have a couple summaries. The first main table in the handout is what we refer to as our loads and resources table. I'm sure the commission is very familiar with this type of presentation. It shows our existing resources, our load, our planning reserve, margin requirements, and then outlines our capacity need compared to our capacity position. So as you can see, for SPS, again, serving about 400,000 customers in Texas and New Mexico, we have about a 869 megawatt long position in 2023 and over 300 megawatts long in 24. So a little different, capacity scenario, but that's just a demonstration of the unique characteristics of different utility systems and history around load growth and customer concentration. So I don't want to reiterate what we've already heard from the other utilities, because a lot of what we have already heard with regard to challenges are not isolated to one service territory or to one utility. These are macro economic factors that we're facing in a lot of respects. But I want to just reiterate a couple of things. Certainly agree with the materials, the labor, the logistics, the commodity price pressures, and the supply chain issues that you've already heard. I agree with El Paso's comments around inventory levels and the lead times for certain things. That is a material challenge. And also, especially for SPS, and particularly in our New Mexico service territory, we do also see load increases. So as we look at an LNR table and we look at our capacity position, we're also looking at that long-term load growth and when a resource position or a capacity position might change, right, in out years as load growth either increases or continues or changes. So an LNR table is, relatively flexible in the sense that we're evaluating this over time. One thing I might add is, we also are watching, and I'm certain the other utilities are too, it didn't come up today yet, but environmental regulations. As environmental regulations change, that can have a large impact potentially on resources on the system or capacity accreditation or the availability of units in a medium-term planning or a short-term planning scenario. So just to talk about some of the challenges that we see, again, similar to what the other utilities have seen. I don't want to oversimplify it, but when we think about delivering projects, whether it's a resource, a transmission project, a distribution project, we think about schedule and cost. So in a high price environment, in a high inflationary environment, we're certainly seeing pressures on costs, but we're also seeing, because of these supply chain issues, the pressure on schedule. And schedule pressures can translate into cost pressures as well. So it's very dynamic. And we see this across the functions. We see it in generation, transmission, distribution. I would say we see it across technology, elbows or splicing or transformers or just wind farms or solar facilities based on panel availability and those kind of things, right? It's all of the components, large and small. But we also see it on what I'll call the feedstocks, right? Labor, logistics, materials. So it really is across the board. So I agree with the earlier commenters that a discussion of this and, maybe a more forward-looking analysis on how to resolve these things, they're not expected to go away in the near term. You've heard earlier, 3 to 5 years is the expectation before we return to normal levels. I think from a price component, normal might not be the old normal. It might be a new normal. We might start to see less variability in commodity prices, for example, but that doesn't mean that commodity prices are necessarily going to come down to the levels they were 3 years ago or 5 years ago, right? They might level out, but it's probably at a much higher level. From a policy perspective, and I've been back at Xcel Energy in Texas, New Mexico now for about 3 months. I spent the last 4 years at our operating company in Colorado, Public Service Company of Colorado, and 6 years before that in SPS. So I have some experience in some of our other jurisdictions. And I would offer to the commission a thought in this workshop as we think about capacity planning and long-term planning. We tend to lock in retirement dates. And I think we're all realizing here that we don't have an ability to lock in commercial operation dates necessarily. Utilities have a very good track record of delivering projects online in time and oftentimes under budget. But that's not the case for every generation resource that's brought online. And it may not be as secure of an assumption in the future. So, from a policy perspective, what does that mean? We may be in a situation where we need to take advantage of opportunities to acquire generation earlier. Just for example, if there's a resource need in 2028, but a resource can be acquired earlier, say 26 or 27, even if it doesn't exactly match the resource need for that year, it may likely very well be the prudent utility action to acquire that resource sooner. That's a balance, right? To take a consideration of imperfect knowledge of the future and make a prudent decision to avoid a potentially delay in COD or a bad situation. The other thing I want to talk about, and it's a little bit different for us being in the Southwest Power Pool, relates to queue position. So, we are seeing differences in bids with our experiences in some of our other jurisdictions as well, in other regional markets. The queue position or the ability of projects to be in a queue and have a generation interconnection established is very, very important. And a lot of developers we see in just kind of monitoring the queues are leaving the queues because it's expensive to stay in the queues. And if there's uncertainty on the project, some developers may not keep their projects, which are in early stages of development, in that queue position. So, we're carefully watching the availability of projects under development in the queue for potential resource acquisitions, right? Potential build-own transfers or potential PPAs, just because that queue position is so critical in the interconnection process for generators. And so for us in the SPP, that's a pretty involved process because that interconnection queue is widespread across the SPP territory. So those are the main points that I would touch on. I'm happy to take some questions. We have some individuals on the phone today as well as we go through the other items in the agenda. I have members of my team here in the room from regulatory and our general counsel is here as well. But I just wanted you to have this handout to see a little bit about our capacity position, to see the mix of generation resources that we have in different accreditation levels that resource types receive. But at the end of the day, we're all working towards a resource transition. As we look to the horizon, we have aggressive goals. Companies have aggressive goals. New Mexico has aggressive goals. So some of these decisions are going to be maybe a higher magnitude in the future as we're thinking about a fleet transition in a short time frame. So I think a lot of the things that we're looking at, we're wanting to think about them sooner because the horizon to get to them is short.
I have a question. You mentioned queue delays. Does your company have projects that are delayed in the queue that will impact resource adequacy in 23 or 24? I mean, I
No,
think that's longer term planning.
right. And we, so from a queue position standpoint, we watch and monitor the queue for others that do have projects in, to kind of know what's out there and what's being asked for. But we don't have, as demonstrated here, a resource need in these time periods, so we don't have projects under development. But others do, right? And so it's a fact of a proof point of market activity to look at those kind of factors.
Exact question.
I know you do.
So you were pointing out that utilities may need to be more opportunistic in terms of resource acquisitions, just in time or whatever, because they're looking at future exigencies. Frankly, they need to be sure that they protect the public. Is that something in your planning process that you could express parameters about how you would do that?
Sure, I can offer kind of a hypothetical example. Like again, if a utility is in a position where they have a identified capacity need in a particular year, and they've issued an RFP to fill that need, if a resource bid comes in with an earlier in service date than the resource need, it may need to be considered differently than it has been in the past. I think, more historically, we've had the luxury of waiting to maybe fit generation acquisitions closer to the resource need. My message is, given the longer lead times for just about everything, we should be expecting that generation additions need longer lead times as well.
So my thought there is in stuff you already provided to the commission, IRPs and other things. Not a bad idea to express exactly, how that might work. So that everybody's there, it's documented ahead of time. Nobody's going, oh, time out.
No surprises.
Yeah. But because I tend to agree with you with the situation we're facing, we need to be more opportunistic. And, certainly coming up with, we probably need to be people to act more quickly on a lot of stuff. So.
And like I say, that's not to say that there's been inaction in the past. I just think it's going to be more challenging, continue to be more challenging in the future.
Yeah. So it's just kind of laying out the ground rules for how we can do things quicker and better. Lay out the parameters, and then no one gets upset.
Understood.
Okay. Thanks.
Do any other commissioners have any quick questions for Ms. Trammell? Vice Chair Maestas, you're not forgotten there on the internet. Do you have any questions at this moment, or?
I'm good, Madam Chair. I'll let you know.
Okay, well, I can rely on you.
But
for that.
Joe, can I be honest with you for just a second?
You're always honest, brutally honest, Stephen Fishman.
You sound like, it starts with S, but I'm not going to say it. But we're really happy you could be part of the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, get out here. Okay.
Well, again, thank you for your time. And if
Thank
you
you
have more
very much.
questions, like I said, we have folks available online as well.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on. I think that covers the IOU presentations. Point B here, the next bullet says chair facilitated discussion among stakeholders and IOUs. And then there's a bullet following that called C, challenges, opportunities, solutions for resource adequacy. Potential issues include And then there's quite a long list of issues. And I think that C is sort of one of the same as B. I think that the chair facilitated discussion among stakeholders and interviews involves all these issues. So I'm not seconding a separate discussion related to point B. Yes. Is that correct? Yeah. I said it was not very good. Okay, I wonder if that's better. If anybody on Zoom can text in and tell us if that's better or not, please let us know. We're gonna proceed, assuming it's okay, until we see an indication otherwise. Thanks very much. So what I'm saying is, I think we should basically just proceed with item C, challenges, opportunities, solutions for resource adequacy.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly if anyone is in attendance, but we did have item number 3, which would be interveners or stakeholders overview of concerns.
I apologize, I missed that altogether. I think we absolutely have to do that before we go into a discussion. I apologize to the interveners and stakeholders present. So for item number 3, interveners, stakeholders overview of concerns. Can you please identify yourselves? I don't know if we had a sign-in sheet for that, but if there's anybody here who feels that you're not part of an IOU, but you feel you want to be a participant in this discussion, or you happen to be an intervener, can you please identify yourself and come forward? We'd love to hear your comments. Nobody? I see.
Madam Chair, if the commission is interested in taking public comment from essentially stakeholders, right now, I do have one individual signed up for public comment right now, if the commission would like that person to proceed.
Yeah, I would.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Yeah, Camilla Fiebelman with Sierra Club had indicated in the chat that she would like to make some remarks, and I'd prefer to have stakeholders in advance of public comment, if that's okay.
And that is my individual, so.
Sorry.
All good. Camilla, if you would unmute yourself and please proceed with your commentary.
Great, thank you so much. I just did want to clarify, was Commissioner Maestas saying that he wanted to hear from other stakeholders before public commenters, or were you wanting to hear from me?
No, Camilla, I consider Sierra Club to be a stakeholder, so
okay.
My bad. I'm not 100% today, so please bear with me.
Don't worry, I'm not 100% most days. Young children, rattle the brain, so. Well, thank you.
Excuse me, Camilla, just for a moment. I agree with you. I think if there are any other parties who, are stakeholders, but they want to state an overview in their mind of concerns, this, I think, is the place to do it. We're sort of forcing this agenda into our weekly agenda that has these standard bullets, but in this context, I think it's most important for the stakeholders and interveners to be speaking about their overview of concerns prior to us getting into the discussion, following this order under Roman numeral 4. So absolutely won't want to hear you now and anybody else. I do see Anastasia Stevens' picture up as well. So I think, Camilla, you have the floor, and then we'll go to Anastasia if that's her intent. So Camilla, please proceed.
Well, thank you. Thank you again so much for the opportunity. I'm Camilla Fiebelman. I'm the director of the Rio Grande chapter of the Sierra Club. And I know, sometimes we're represented in these forums more formally through legal counsel. But since this was more of a workshop and a sort of open discussion, I thought it would be appropriate for me to join in. And, first, I just want to thank the commission for really recognizing the public interest in preventing air pollution and climate change that have cost New Mexico consumers so much already. And I think this summer is no better example of how climate change costs us all. We appreciate you holding the utilities accountable, even while the utilities are trying to do their best in a very difficult climate, but to really comply with the Energy Transition Act. We really want you to recognize the challenges in the solar industry of the pandemic, supply chain issues, and the Commerce Department investigation. And recognize that working to overcome these challenges is really critical to meeting the Energy Transition Act requirements and protecting our families from the worst impacts of the climate crisis. In the end, renewable energy is a far better solution than fossil fuels and is still less costly than the current price of gas. I wasn't able to hear the utility presentations very well, and so some of my comments may not be directly relevant to their particular statements, but we would ask you to be mindful of the considerable hazards and unanswered questions of converting gas facilities to hydrogen. Combusting hydrogen produces NOx pollutions up to 6 times more than simply burning fossil fuel gas. NOx cause serious health impacts, including asthma and respiratory infections, and is a precursor to particulate matter and ozone. Methods of lowering NOx emissions at power plants are currently very limited. Researchers have found that using fossil-fueled blue hydrogen at power plants produces more climate emissions than just directly burning the natural gas for power. Hydrogen blending has been demonstrated to be dangerous all along the production chain, including at end uses. Gas appliances can really only handle hydrogen blending of 5 to 20% by volume, which severely limits the potential for emissions reductions. And even green hydrogen is an inefficient way to produce electric power when renewable energy can be used directly to produce electricity. So we urge you to exercise some serious skepticism of strategies that are likely to turn out to take us backwards as we look towards climate solutions. And then on one last topic, I'd like us to take special care in looking at the benefits coming out of the IRA. The law extends the 30% investment tax credits and production tax credits for solar and wind resources through 2032 and creates a 30% investment tax credit for battery storage investments through 2032. Those projects may be eligible for 10% additional tax credits if the resources are installed in an energy community, and another 10% credit if the projects are constructed with domestic parts. And they define an energy community as a brownfield site, or number 2, a census tract or an adjoining census tract where a coal-fired electric generating unit has closed since December 31st of 2009, or number 3, an area that has had significant employment related to extraction, processing, transport, or storage of coal, oil, natural gas, or has had an unemployment rate at or above the national average. This is exciting because New Mexico IOUs can install solar plus storage at or adjacent to existing coal plants, as we're starting to see, for example, and take advantage of a 50% fully transferable tax credit, effectively cutting the cost in half. The law also offers significant direct loan and guarantees for transmission upgrades, which may be necessary to adding those resources. So we think that the IOUs should really take a deep and serious look at their resource plans in light of these new incentives. And that is all I have for you today, and I appreciate the really good conversation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Feivelman. Those were very interesting comments. I appreciate it. So we'll move on to the next commenter from as a stakeholder. And is that Anastasia Stevens? Anastasia, were you? I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having difficulty unmuting myself, as is often the case. And I see that let me start the video too, if I can get that. It's there. Thank you, everybody. I'm Anastasia Stevens. I'm an attorney doing record work for the city of Las Cruces. Hans told me that I could just participate by being part of the discussion in the next section. So I don't really have prepared comments. I just would just very generally remind you all that the city of Las Cruces has had more than an earlier renewable excuse me, goals than the state has for a number of years. But we also are not exactly a rich community, and we want to focus on cost effectiveness as well. So with that said, without not wanting to touch upon pending cases, I would just, it appears that what's going on in the P&M context with meetings is the polar opposite of what El Paso Electric has done with stakeholders who haven't been informed despite requests. At least we've been told, oh, we'll work it out, and then we'll tell you when we file the application. So just be aware that here, knowledge has to come at some point, and there have been editorials in the newspaper about expedited matters at the commission. That's just, it has to be a two-way street, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think that the commissioners appreciate that. I wish that it were clear that the utilities did as well. And I'm permitted to participate in the next section. I will say nothing more, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Stevens. All right, let's move on then to, yes, Commissioner Byrd. Oh, Jim Desjardins. I'm
Thank you,
wondering.
Commissioner Hall. I would just clarify, is this the time to make public comment if you have one? Because then at the agenda that I have, it's after discussion, but if this is the right time,
Yes, this is the right time. So if you could come up and
okay, sure.
it's fine if you wear your mask, but just be very loud because
I'll take it off now.
it's whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay.
Okay, I've been this close to the commission for quite some time. So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Commissioner and Commissioners. My name is Jim Desjardins, as you've heard, and I'm the Executive Director of the Renewable Energy Industry Association. Thank you very much for hosting the meeting here, and I'll get together for a little bit. I know this meeting is really focused on, I think, more near-term adequacy of energy, but I would like to kind of just stretch that a little bit. And I think in the near future, there's a consensus that as we transition to renewable resources, which are variable, and as we start to integrate electric vehicles and embark on building electrification, we're going to basically have, for lack of a better term, some bumps. And obviously the issues of being able to get equipment and everything else is making things a lot more difficult. Recently, and I think it was discussed at a recent commission hearing, there was a discussion about California and how when their grid started to hit their limit, the governor sent out a text, and I guess immediately the load was reduced by 4%, which was really kind of a lifesaver. And I think that to take that a step further, if you could call upon
distributed energy resources that are available at homes and businesses, then, you could do even more to prevent such a situation. And in fact, you could be proactive about it and put together a process or plan of how we could do that. So we don't have to resort to a text saying, please, dispatch immediately or else you're going to crash. So, and this technology is either available or going to be available near term. I know there's been a workshop about this. And so I really just want to urge the commission to, when they're doing this kind of planning, to take that into consideration. And so that I think in the long term, it will provide a more functional grid. Thank you for your time.
Now, you intend, Mr. Richard, and you intend to participate in the discussion following, because we're just about to get into the portion of the agenda that involves discussion.
Okay.
We're just wrapping up the part of the agenda that addresses challenges. And to the extent I hear you saying we have a challenge about responding quickly, I see that as your comment. But you sounded like you were wrapping up and maybe it's.
No.
Okay.
I was planning to stay here. I think it's still 4:30.
Okay.
We'll want some more detailed input.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
participants from all sides. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We'll move on to the discussion part now of this agenda that relates to challenges, opportunities, and solutions for resource adequacy. Potential issues include, and I guess I need to ask Commissioner Fishman and Commissioner Maestas if you want to go in order, or you want to basically let the interveners. I guess we could go in order. I can't think of another structure to apply to this. And you have it. All right. Okay, fine. Let's do that.
I think this is where the utilities can talk, and
Yeah.
they kind of gave us the overview, but now they can talk more specifically about board plans.
Okay, and I guess what I'm getting at is we can pick one topic, but there's, certainly going to be some overlap. So I think what we'll end up having happen is maybe a conversation that flows from topic to topic, but I want people to feel free about what they want to bring to each topic that we identify, so you don't.
Yeah,
you know,
those are just prompts for
Artificial.
anything else.
Yeah, I don't want people to artificially constrain yourself. So our first topic is something we did hear about with respect to challenges, firm and non-firm supply. And I'll hand this out to whoever wants to, or open up the mic, I guess, anybody who wants to go further on the subject of firm and non-supply, a firm and non-firm supply, then you may have already made.
Well, I'm pointing to A, so each IOU.
Well, no, we're way past that. We did that. We did that first.
We
We did.
No, we have not. They were talking about supply chain,
Oh, wait, you're right.
but they didn't talk about their resource adequacy plan.
It's this agenda, it's an agenda. I can't really think through it. Okay, so, wait a minute. Okay. Oh, okay, fine. Each IOU presents a detailed resource adequacy plan for the years 2023.
It's a little awkward with two pieces.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Madam Chair, I agree with Commissioner Fishman that maybe even this agenda item can include all the list of resource adequacy related issues under Part C. And that way, when one IOU comes up, they can cover the gamut of all those issues that we've listed, potential issues for them to discuss.
I appreciate you putting it that way, Vice Chair Maestas. I think that's exactly how we should proceed. So, great. So, whatever you think are your challenges plus solutions. I mean, you've already given us your challenges. Just talk about your solutions as you see them.
So again, I'm Mark Fenton, Executive Director of Regulatory for PNM. And we've got Tom Falgren. We were going to talk specifically about the 2023-2024 resource adequacy. I know that's really been an issue. PNM's been at the forefront for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So Tom's got prepared remarks, or he's going to go through 2023. He's going to go through 2024. I asked Nick Phillips, our Director of Integrated Resource Planning, to join me up here. He's got a lot of the detail behind the numbers as well to support what Tom's talking about. And then in terms of these other subject matters, we didn't have prepared remarks, but we have people ready to answer. It could be Tom or Nick, or we have, if it's curtailment plans, we have Manuel. If it's demand response, we have Zach. So why don't we turn it over to Tom, and he can really go into the detail on 2023 and 2024. So Tom, are you out there in the world, in the internet world?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'd like to do is just, we're going to get into a lot of discussion, and I think it'd just be good to cover briefly some background or a little bit of dialogue on a couple of topics before we just start quoting numbers and jumping into things, if you would. So the first one, I just want to give a little perspective on the PPA environment, if we would. And again, I appreciate the developers have had a pretty rough couple past years. I think even before you go to the disruptions, if you go back even 3-4 years ago, we saw pressures already. There were tariffs implied on the Chinese imports, and then the worldwide demand for renewables has increased, which has already started to put pressures on. Then within the last few years, we've seen the government ordered shutdowns for manufacturers, worldwide shipping, delays in workforce, forced labor prevention, the potential extension of the tariffs. So we do appreciate the environment they're in. But I think it's good for the group. I think it may appear to some stakeholders, interveners, others, that you may see random requests from the utilities. And I wanted to cover a little bit of background on how a PPA kind of works, just to get some perspective on that, if we could. And again, if you look at each PPA is a separate standalone limited liability corporation. So again, it's not set up with the same structure as obligation to serve as utility projects. So then the way this works typically is the PPA developer goes out, tries to frame the project. Then they try to get approval for that project, get selected in the process. And then after they've gone through the process, been selected and approved, then they typically go out and try to secure equity financing. And then after they've secured equity financing, really then make firm contracts for the major equipment contracts. So the difficult thing that's happened is, a lot of the projects that are in process have been developed, right? But they don't have the equity, they don't have the bank behind them, and they haven't got a lot of signed contracts for the major equipment purchases. And so then that puts these limited liability corporations in a position where, if the utilities or the customers aren't willing to give relief on those signed contracts, then the LLC will just collapse, declare bankruptcy. But if we want the projects to go forward, we have to recognize that the only way those developers can move forward is they can get a banker to agree to the current state of those projects. I just want to emphasize that. And again, what this does then is, puts the utilities in a somewhat precarious situation, because now we're asking for, modifications to signed contracts, and we're in a position where we have to try to find some prudency review about how that increase in a signed contract meets the industry changes that have happened, reflects the industry changes, but then also is still in the best interest of customers. The difficult thing is there aren't projects that can come online to replace them in the same timeline. So that's just the difficulty that we've seen with that. The other difficulty we see with that is, if not moving forward with those contracts does require us to go to the market to purchase, which again can result in price risk for our customers as well. So I just wanted to give a little perspective on that, why it's necessary for moving forward with contracts that are renewable contracts that are in the process, why changes to the contract are necessary, because again, those developers don't have the same obligation to serve, not the same model. And unless we do, you'll just see a collapse of those projects, bankruptcy, and you'll be left starting over, if you would. The other topic I'd like to cover just briefly before we get into the numbers is really the topic of resource planning, and we've seen significant complexity increases in that. So again, years ago, we would define things like resource margin, planning resource margin, is really just the nameplate capacity on resources. Obviously, when the first solar came on, the solar did give us a 1-for-1 capacity credit on, for that addition. As we've moved more to our net peak demands, our most challenging part of reliability is after sunset. Those renewables don't provide capacity. So the industry has moved, and PNM has moved as well, to a modification or an update on that resource planning calculation. So if I could just introduce two terms, you'll hear that throughout the process. There's an ICAP, which is the installed capacity, which is more the traditional resource planning calculation. And it really goes off a nameplate capacity, essentially. And then there's a UCAP, which is the unforced capacity. And what that does is give you the true capacity that's meeting the need at the time that customers need the reliability component. So again, the industry is moving from this ICAP historical to a UCAP. And just to throw some numbers out there is we've had, traditionally PNM has a 13% ICAP. But as we showed in our last resource planning, IRP, and in our Palo Verde replacement, is we justified an increase to 18% UCAP. So an increase, but also a correction, similar to what SPP has done, similar to what Cal ISO has done, recognizing that unforced capacity requirement as you're moving more to increase variable resources. And as we look to the future, we'll see that increase across the industry up into the 20% range, if we would. So with that background, I'll just give a quick recap. Summer 2022, we looked at the commission approval of San Juan shutdown. There was 4 replacement solar battery projects. 2 of those projects were selected for location in Central Consolidated School Districts. Originally, developers had promised those online late 21, early 22. However, due to the disruptions, none of those projects came on to serve customers in 2022. Obviously, we've gone through some market resources and some extension of San Juan, and we were able to serve customers reliably in 2022. Our units performed well. And then as we look, and then we've continued to work with all 4 of those projects, the developers for those. And we're still anticipating 2 of those projects coming online to meet the summer 2023 peak as we start to look at 23 resource adequacy. The 2 projects located in San Juan County will not achieve an install by 2023. We continue to work with those developers. We're optimistic that those 2 projects can still be viable, and we can still demonstrate, even though we recognized at the time they weren't the lowest cost, but I think we're still optimistic we can demonstrate their reasonable cost to customers and that we can reasonably bring them online before summer of 2024. But that will require a lot of cooperation by this group to move them forward. Additionally, if we look, 114 megawatts of Palo Verde lease capacity expiring, and the majority of it expires in 23. The commission approved 3 projects, replacement projects, 2 solar battery projects, 1 standalone project, 1 standalone battery project. again, due to the delays in those projects, none of those projects will be available in 2023 peak. We've gone back and through this process and again, kind of balancing those cost increase for the developers to move forward versus, making sure those are in the best interest of customers. Two of those projects requested extensions and price increases that PNM could just not justify as being in the best interest of our customers. So those projects are not moving forward. The one project on that group that is moving forward is the project that Mark Fenton talked about earlier, the Atrisco project. And again, through the approval process, through the commission, we appreciate that. We moved to an increase in price for the battery, but also increased the price, the size of that battery from 150 to 300 megawatts. And that project is anticipated to be available for summer 2024 resources. So that does leave us quite a hole in 2023. We were roughly short about 450 megawatts. In order to address that, we did quite a number of activities. Again, we submitted a RFP for permanent resources. Again, the ability to bring a permanent resource on a 23 and even 24 is really not practical in today's environment. Starting from go, we solicited a market RFP. We've been active bidded in other utility RFPs, and then we've just pursued our potential bilateral agreements with the other parties that we frequently do business with. So through collection of those activities, we have been able to solve 200 of that 450. So we have secured that with firm capacity today. And then, so we'll continue to look for opportunities to solve the rest of the 250 for 2023. But if you look forward, if you look at the nature of forward markets, there isn't a tremendous capacity that's out there that far ahead. Now, it doesn't seem far ahead, but in the markets, it is far ahead unless you're securing multiple years. And what a lot of entities have done, and they're talking, and we're going to continue to talk with them, is there's a lot of uncertainty about the 2022 peak season. And so a lot of entities that have had excess capacity have kind of waited out the 2022 season to see kind of where it went, because that would have a significant impact on the futures prices for the 2023 market. And so as we look to wind down the 2022 season here into September and look into October, November, we do look for some opportunities to do more business with those entities that have excess capacity and secure some more contracts. So what you'll see from us is really looking to do another market RFP in October, November to try to solve a lot of those items, if you would.
Can I ask a question?
So if you get, sorry, I'll finish quickly if we can. And then, so if you look at our reserve margin, so then just to jump to the numbers, if we look at 2023,
Hey, Tom?
we are, yes.
Commissioner Hall had a question for you before you went forward.
Oh, sure. Sure, my fault. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you hear me all right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I understood the numbers. I said, I think you said you have a hole in 2023 of 450 megawatts, but you've got 200 of that taken care of, and you're still going to need to find 250 megawatts. And you're going to be looking for that in October, November with a market RFP. Does that capture what you said?
Essentially, yes, I think that's accurate. We will look at all opportunities, but again, the most likely opportunity to solve the majority of it will be a market RFP. So,
Great.
So then if we, sorry, did I answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So if we jump to the numbers, planning reserve margin for 2023, if we look at an ICAP number, again, that's a historical reserve planning margin. Our planning reserve margin now with what we've secured with the load forecast that we projected previously is at 9.5. And if you look at a UCAP number for 2023, it's 4.9%. So we're on the positive side, but again, not in a position where we'd like to be. Now, just quickly, if we move to 24, a lot of the resources that we talked about above, hopefully the two projects that are in San Juan County, the Atrisco project, they will come online. And if they come online, then what that does is put our ICAP and UCAP for 24 in good shape in the 20 plus range for 24. Now, I caveat that with, again, as I think folks have noted, we are seeing some potential for load increases, or at least peak load increases. So we continue to evaluate our load forecast, and we'll have to update, make adjustments for that. So again, 23, yes, we've made good progress, solved about half of the issue. We got to be aggressive at solving the rest of it. 24, we're in decent shape right now, but I would also advocate that a lot of our heads and a lot of our energy are around the 25, 26, 27, 28 range right now, because that's where we can really impact significant changes and solve issues longer term. So with all of that quick speak, I will stop and look for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fahlgren. I appreciate that good detail and breadth of information. Do any commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Fishman.
Tom, Mr. Fahlgren, great to hear your voice.
Yes, sir.
In the market RFPs that have gone out, have those been focused on supply side, or have they included demand side resources as well?
Yeah, we would look for any and all options, if you would. Demand side, I think, again, why we agree with all parties that demand side is a great opportunity. What we've seen in New Mexico is some limited opportunities for that. We'll continue to work on those opportunities and bring them forward. But again, that's probably more of a 25, 26, and you'll see some things, I think, in our next rate case on those items. But limited opportunity in the short term, other than really encouraging people to participate in our current programs. And as Zach Johnson can explain more detail, our current programs are really non-firm demand. So folks can opt out of those. And so really from an operator or a resource adequacy perspective, they don't really provide benefit to the overall resource adequacy question.
So, and I've raised this a couple of times during open meetings and such. There are utilities that have special curtailment rates that are in place specifically for emergency situations where supply is short. And I guess SMUD is one, and I've read about some on the East Coast. Are there any opportunities to put something like that in place, say for 2023 and 24, if all else fails? I would much rather see people have an opportunity to voluntarily curtail than to subject them to a rolling blackout, for instance, where you have your program where you try to be fair, but you like the customer to choose if you can. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Fishman, we've looked at that. We have Stella Chan. I don't know if Stella, if you're on the line, but we have an interruptible rate now, interruptible rate 8. We have 5 customers on that rate. And then we've also hired a consultant to look specifically at what you just asked about 2023 and 2024. And if we would be able to get any load that could help us curtail our peak? And basically, the answer was no, because of our load profile and the amount of industrial customers we have, which is a small portion of our load. But Stella, are you on the line? Maybe you could.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Stella,
Good
you wanted to-
afternoon. Yeah, I
This
can
is Stella
speak to it.
She's our director of pricing. She can talk to us about our existing rate 8 and what she looked at through the consultant for 2023 and 2024. So Stella, why don't you share some with us?
Okay. Good afternoon. Yes, so P&M, we engage a consultant to look at additional customer and capacity to enroll in our interruptible program. As you know, we have our peak demand program, and that come into about, I think, 65 megawatts of capacity. And then our rider 8, which is the interruptible program that Mark talked about, for our 5 customer, we bring in about close to 13 megawatt of capacity. So 13. Yeah.
Hello, Commissioner Hall.
Yes.
Stella, are these customers that are industrial customers or large?
Yes,
large
they are.
customers?
Yeah, our 5 rider 8 interruptible program customer, they are our one of those largest industrial customers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we did engage and study other customers that potentially can help us to expand the program. And when we look at additional customer, so in addition to the largest customer that's already in the interruptible program and those that are enrolled in the Peak Saver program, we could identify only a handful of customers. The reason it's so difficult to get additional interruptible customer is because when we have capacity need is between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. So when you look at additional interruptible capacity, you need to look at customer that they are operating, have running their business during those hours so they can be interrupted. So we identify a handful of customers, and mainly those customers are our tribal casino customers that they are operating during those hours, that they probably have some kind of generator and or battery, so they can potentially be interrupted. However, because of the nature of the business, I think it will be very challenging for those customers participate in a voluntary program to be interrupted while they are running their business or running their operation, manufacturing, producing something. So the conclusion is we can identify more customer, but the likelihood of those customers to be able to sign up and commit to a firm capacity commitment is going to be challenging.
And Stella, that's not just your opinion. We had a consultant look at and work with those customers.
Yeah.
That's good. I'd like to ask a follow-up question to that, though, which is, when I think about how customers responded in California, and when I think about it, I don't know I assume they were residential customers. Maybe the success of that customer response was in part due to large customers who could self-curtail a little bit, but no, that would be something to know. But my point is, when I think of that kind of response among what I imagine to be largely residential customers, I guess because we have a text message, it's hard to reconcile that with what Ms. Chan is saying here about it wouldn't necessarily be so easy to get other groups of customers to participate.
Chair,
yeah.
We do have a demand response program through our energy efficiency program. We have both a commercial program and a residential program, and they are voluntary, as Tom said. We get about like 25 megawatts or so.
We count 30 megawatts towards our resource adequacy requirements from those two programs. Contractually, they have a higher amount, but due to the way the programs are structured as a voluntary program, we see a lot of opt-outs. So, for example, in the Peak Saver program, while it's a 25 megawatt contractual program, they can contractually drop down to only 10 megawatts. Voluntary customers can opt out. There's no damage provisions assessed against the provider of those programs, and the customers, especially if you're going to assess damages against customers, they're never going to do that.
You know, I'm thinking probably nobody can hear you.
Oh.
Hey, Mark, if I could add, Mark, I think an important consideration is you hate to say it, but a crisis does sharpen everybody's attention. I think if you look at the same demand response that they received in 2020, before they rolled blackouts in CalISO, you would have not seen anywhere near the same voluntary reductions. I think the citizens of California were conditioned during that events to take it seriously. And I think it is one of the struggles that we have in the utilities, which is, we see the need, but we're a little bit victims of our own success in that, oh, well, you solved 2022 resource adequacy, so, must not have been a big deal, right? Oh, no, it was a really big deal, okay? But for an average customer, they're going, well, I didn't see any lights go out, so they must have been overreacting. So I think that, in my opinion, that is a big factor in it, because when you look back at their curtailments that they saw in 2020, they were not anywhere near what they saw this time around.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. You want to say?
I can repeat what I was saying about the existing programs, how we're looking at that for resource adequacy.
Okay.
And I would agree with Tom. I think that California has had so many close calls that when they put out a plea, the governor puts out a plea, more people are likely to respond. The existing programs that we have right now are Peak Saver and Power Saver. Power Saver is a residential program and Peak Saver is a commercial program. Both of them, we target contractually about 25 megawatts of capacity. But because they are voluntary, we don't typically get that amount of capacity when we actually call events. So when we put in, we don't get that amount of capacity reductions when we call events. More recently, what we've been seeing is the Peak Saver program tending to come in around 10, 11, 12 megawatts as opposed to 25 megawatts. The Power Saver program coming in a little bit better, but still typically under 25 megawatts, more like 20, 21 megawatts. So in our resource adequacy tables, what we tend to show is about 30 megawatts of capacity reduction from the combined Peak Saver and Power Saver programs. A little more detail on Power Saver, that's the residential. It targets mainly air conditioners. Not everybody in New Mexico and Albuquerque has air conditioners. There's still a lot of swamp, but there, I believe, roughly 55,000 customers enrolled in that program, so a pretty good amount. And when they dispatch the program, they will call a portion of those customers, not all of them at once, and cycle through. So not everybody's losing all their air conditioning at once. Then if you do that and you call multiple events in a row and you were to do it to everybody, they'll start getting people to drop out. It's customer fatigue and they don't want to participate.
Is this an opt-out or opt-in program?
It's a voluntary program to join and then they can opt out.
Okay.
And Peak Saver targets the commercial groups. Again, it's a voluntary program. What we've seen in the more recent years is that there's been a few larger customers who used to participate heavily in the program are opting out of events. And the trend for both programs has been a declining contribution to our capacity from say 2018 to now. The interruptible rider that Stella talked about, that's separate and apart from Peak Saver and Power Saver. That's our rate rider 8. There's 5 customers on there that provide about 11 megawatts of interruptible load. Those are the industrial customers. That tariff was closed to new customers. The commission would need to look at reopening that if we wanted to add new customers to that program. But the consensus from the consultant that we worked with and the market analysis said that we're not likely to find customers who want to participate in that program because they're not going to get paid enough to disrupt their business operations.
That's interesting. Does that mean you should pay them more?
You have to justify that against what the rest of the system needs are going to be. Is it worth paying them that much to participate in a program that you may need, you may not? the way the current program is structured, it's under a system emergency condition only. So we would have to almost get to a point where we're declaring an energy emergency alert before we could call that system emergency. And depending on where those customer loads are actually located on the system compared to where the trouble spots on the system are, interrupting that customer may or may not actually help the system.
Didn't the consultant question whether there was enough capacity out there? Really?
Right, and the existing, whether you're looking at peak saver, power saver, or the interruptible rate, right now they're currently structured as during the on-peak window for P&M's rates, which is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But the most significant stresses on the system as we're moving towards more penetrations of solar are from 5 to 10 p.m. So even calling them during the window we can call them may not solve the problem. So we need to have a more overhaul of the pricing structure when rates are on peak, possibly getting into real-time rates with the grid modernization coming up, AMI, all those things will help. But right now, the system really isn't structured in a way where the interruptible rates and the demand response are addressing the specific needs as our system transitions.
Yeah, regarding residential customers, most of your load is residential as a system. My understanding is your meters, whoever's appropriate to answer this question, my understanding is that your meters don't support curtailment rates. So that somehow there's a limitation on being able to do that with residential customers.
Well, yeah, so about 50 or 55% of our customer load is residential, and then only 10% is industrial, less than 10% of the balance is commercial.
Yeah.
The majority of the residential customers have monthly, do not have interval meters. They just have monthly meters where you can see the total kilowatt hours consumed over the month, and you can't really tell what they're doing in any individual hour to hour. If you want to pay a customer for curtailing during a specific time period, you have to go to register. Are they doing what you're asking them to do during that time period?
So the meters currently do not allow you to do that.
Correct.
Okay. And so that's something that AMI would address going forward, because now, per your earlier discussion, it feels like if we went forward with rapid implementation, this 3 to 5 year time frame where we've got supply chain issues, if we move quickly, it could start to have some impact on that. Create a more of a safety cushion, if you will.
I'd agree with that. If you could get more advanced metering infrastructure out there, you could provide better price signals to customers, do more creative rate designs. It will take time to swap out 500,000 meters. And the meters are also part of the supply chain.
Sure.
You will see an application on October 3rd for grid modernization that will include the AMI proposal.
So one of the comments I've seen in documents going back and forth is that if you want to come up with a new curtailment rate, you would have to do it through a rate case. And I have to say my response to that was, gee, we just went through the Uri weather event, and we made changes to billing, emergency changes to billing for that to protect customers. Why couldn't we do it in this case when the lights go out? And quite frankly, they could put a lot of people in danger. So any thoughts on that? I just found that kind of an odd remark and kind of the idea of putting a piecemeal rate making principle ahead of protecting customers from blackouts felt to me like misplaced priorities.
Did you hear that? Where did you hear that?
Oh, I've read it in a couple of documents. I can't recall exactly where.
Okay.
But I think comments, I don't know if it was from Tom, some response to the commission or where I heard, but I just wanted responses that if we had an opportunity to do that, would utilities feel comfortable setting up rates
admittedly piecemeal, but for an emergency that's maybe more important than the piecemeal principle. Is that something you guys would open up your minds to if an opportunity presented itself?
Stella, do you want to comment on that, on rate design? I know we're planning on a time of day proposal in our rate.
Yes, I mean, with the AMI, not just meter itself, but also the communication behind it to enable the utility to be able to send the price signal back to the customer. And with that, then we can come up with more of the rate design that can help. But I just don't know what a rate going to look like if it's outside a rate case, and to come up with a rate structure that is high enough to encourage customer to reduce usage. I think the time of day program that we're talking about that is going to propose is going to reflect the cost structure. And so hopefully it will be very encouraging for customer to shift their usage and help us to address our 5 to 10 potentially capacity issue. But we're thinking about, definitely, we are going to propose something to address that.
I guess what I'd ask here is, let's keep our priorities straight. The lights going out is the worst case.
Yep.
A minor violation of the piecemeal rate making principle, which, by the way, we do all the time. We have cases in front of us all the time where we're violating piecemeal rate making. To suddenly raise that as an obstacle in this context seems to be counterproductive. So I'll just leave it at, please, utilities, keep your minds open if PNM turns out, and hopefully not, you guys are pretty capable, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna avoid a crisis here, but if we do, we need to keep all options open. And if there's a curtailment rate or piecemeal rate making or some emergency, something we can pull together that we pull in, as Mr. Jardin was pointing out earlier, we need to stay open to all those possibilities. So I'll just leave that out.
That's fine. Any other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Vice Chair Maestas, do you have any questions you'd like to pose?
Not at this point, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Bird. Mr. Santiago? Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, this is a workshop. Any stakeholders have any questions or responses to this discussion? Yes, but
anything else that PNM wants to talk about in terms of?
Oh, yes, I don't mean to cut you off. I just meant.
I don't think so. You know, your agenda, you had curtailment plans. We have manual here. We also, communication plans, but I think you hit it right on the head. Our plan is to be able to serve the load and keep the lights on.
So I'll ask one other question on communication. We talked about the California plan. If we wanted to do something like that, is New Mexico even capable of doing that? Or would we have to engage with some kind of legislation or working with one of the Do It or somebody that we could use the Amber Alert system to do that kind of communication? What would be the practicality?
We've got a very robust communication plan. Ray, are you on the line? Maybe you could spend a couple.
I am, Mark.
Yeah, this is Ray Sandoval. He's our Director of Communications, and he's put together a very robust communication plan in the event that we did have to have curtailment. So Ray, can you give us a couple minutes
a high-level overview of our plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Madam Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for the time today. Yeah, you know, one of the things that we wanted to look at is, of course, as Mark said, and as Tom and as Nick have been talking through, the first thing is to not put customers in that situation. But we realize that we have to be prudent and we have to plan for all sorts of contingencies. And so the first thing that we would do is we would go out, we'd wake up a morning, it would look like, you know, demand is exceeding resources. And by early afternoon, we could be in a situation where we'd have to do strategic rotating outages. And so our first appeal would be to the public. And it would be a full court press, all hands on deck. We're working right now with news directors to actually come up with what we call the conservometer, right? So that way, this is not something that they are not familiar with. And that they would understand exactly the call for conservation. You know, that once we hit that, we're in a full press mode to actually get customers to conserve. So that way we can get through that day and make it. And then we can talk about some of the causes or what happened a little bit later. But what we really want to do is have our news media folks and our public be ready to help us conserve and really to save the grid and make sure that we don't have to implement those strategic rotating outages. So what we've done is we put together a plan that just goes out in terms of social media, in terms of robocalls, in terms of text messages. We have a little bit more leadway because these are not marketing. These are actually information about your account, so we can reach out directly to the customer through their phone. We have to be careful with text messages because some of our customers actually pay for text messages. So we're thinking about robocalls. Again, we would go to the news organizations to be able to talk with the news folks to get that on the news. We would do talk radio. So we've scheduled times to talk to all of the news directors so that way we could go on and make these pleas for that. We have both TV commercials as well as radio ads that we would put in place almost immediately to help us get that conservation message. But one of the things that I want to say is from a communication standpoint, and Nick alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that, you know, you have to use this sparingly. This has to be a break the glass situation, because what happens in a situation is if we go out and we scare the public and it doesn't happen, the next time that we try to do this, it's going to be very, very difficult to get them to actually get motivated. And so again, what we want to do is make sure that we're really in a situation where we would necessarily have to put this into effect. And basically, like I said, it would be a full court press the entire afternoon. And then ultimately, if we had to go into a situation in which we had interruptions, we are prepared to talk about that into what zip codes would be affected, how long that would be affected, the fact that police, fire, and hospitals are exempt from some of the places that we look at, and work on those situations so that way the public would completely understand exactly what was going on and be open and ready for that. We have a website that is not live right now that would go into effect to do into the conservation, and then also would have another website that if we had to institute strategic rotating outages, it would almost be like an outage map where people could go back and click on that and see where the rotating outages would be, and then also look for the duration so that they could help plan for those kind of things. The other thing that we decided to do is revamp our website. Now there's a banner that can run across the website with really important information. And so that way we can say, we're in a conservation mode, please help us conserve. Or if we have to go into that strategic rotating outages, we can put that information directly. And again, we've gone back and looked at our plan. We've dusted off some of the plans that we had before. We found that they were not adequate at the time because they didn't take into account kind of our social media and other new electronic means of communicating with customers. So we've built a new communications plan from the ground up. We have template news releases. So that way we can quickly get information out. But of course, we have to put back certain details in that, but those are ready to go. As I said, the radio ads, the TV ads are ready to go. And we're working on an animated graphics, which is basically our conservometer that we really want to teach, that if we ever needed to pull this out, this would really be a consistent way across all media to really get customers to understand exactly what we're trying to get them to do. So.
Even I could understand that conservometer, so well done.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
In terms of the cell phones and text messages, is that a capability you have to reach most of your customers with or not?
We do, and again, there are some, text can spam laws, but in this situation, since it's information about their account and it's not marketing, we feel we could do that. We want to be careful though, Commissioner, just again, we understand that some of our customers are low income, and because of that, their plans may be that they get charged for text messages. And so we might go down the robocall route. So that way, not only can the robocall inform them of what's going on, but they can actually press 1 and actually be connected to somebody if they have additional questions or other issues that they may want to address. So we're looking at that, but what we'll look at is to make sure that if we're going to use text messages, we want to make sure that our customers understand that there might be some costs associated with that. And we want to use that again sparingly to make sure that we don't, cry wolf. And then all of a sudden, when we really need this, we're going to be in a situation where people are not listening.
Would it make sense to have to use something like an Amber Alert system for that, or do you feel like that's overkill?
I don't think that that's overkill. It's something that we could definitely look into. In my other hat, I work with Zozobra, and one of the things that we did is that we actually started working with the city of Santa Fe to provide alerts about road closures and just information that actually, and the technology is such is that you can actually geofence Commissioner, and so you can figure out where the neighborhoods or a radius around that. And so if we needed to do a strategic rotating outage, we could actually geofence that to make sure that people in that area would know that. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I hadn't thought about that before, but I'm definitely going to start researching that. I think that's a great idea.
Just from a policy standpoint, it seems to me that a major power outage impacts and endangers far more people than your typical Amber Alert. So it seems like a wise use of that kind of system. So it seems like it might be worth looking into. So I appreciate your openness to that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. I think it's a great suggestion.
I agree. Good idea. Was that all that you had?
That's all we have. Tom, do you have anything further?
Just to make sure we give the other IOUs and others a chance, I think we'll just stand for questions. And if we have time later, we could pursue other questions if we want.
Okay. I was just going to say, yeah. So I think let me just repeat to the commissioners. Do any commissioners have any other questions at this point? I'll open up the stakeholder questions. No? Any stakeholders have any comments or questions related to what we just heard? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So, well, thank you very much for your time and the information. I'm very appreciative of it myself.
Thank you.
So I guess the next utility up will go in the same order. That would be El Paso Electric to come up and kind of discuss your overall issues rather than just your broad overview.
Smart.
That could be another. Sure. They keep setting each other up.
No, thank you. When I was introduced, I'm Vice President over System Operations and Resource Strategy. So in that capacity, it's resource planning as well as the system operations, the hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute balancing of our systems. And so,
and I'm trying to raise your voice as much as you can, even though it's right next to you. Right? Can't hear
over a little bit. Sure.
Yeah.
So when we talk about 2023 loads and in our resource position, Mr. Fogren talked about, I think he gave great background. We develop annually a loads and resource projection. So in 2023, We are projecting a load that was exceeded this summer and met 2025 load projections. So we are now projecting our 2023 summer loads to be about 80 megawatts higher than we had planned for. So when you talk about planning, when we talk about planning reserve margins, for 2023, we started that process in 2017 and 2019. We had load forecasts. We go out for RFPs, we negotiate agreements, we bring them for approval. It's a long time frame. When there's a sudden switch like that, it's hard to meet planning reserve margins a year or two in advance. So what we do typically, planning reserves allow for something happens with the generator. Something happens with load that you can't foresee a few years out. So you build in this planning reserve margin to account for the unknown. As you get into the year 2023, a little more things are known. You know, you have a better idea about the status of your generation. You can take more recent load projections and put those in, and you can build around what you know and what you need to manage on a day-to-day basis. On a day-to-day basis, we don't carry planning reserve margins day to day. We carry what we call operating reserves. So we are involved in a group with other Southwest utilities, and we share reserves with each other. If we were to lose a generator, we call on our neighbors. They give us additional resources to make up for that hour and vice versa. So
let me just ask you, so operating reserve margins are much, much shorter, like day to day, as opposed to planning reserve margins, which are
yes.
year units? Or,
yeah, so when we say we are going to have a load of 2,200 megawatts on our system, we don't know if that is June, July, August, first part of September. It could be at any of those points. And so from our perspective, and what we did this summer, because we needed to go out and acquire additional megawatts this summer as well, is we will plan once we're in the year. I mean, if we can't issue an RFP and we can't go through the whole process of interconnection agreements, which was talked about earlier, in the month, we will specifically target going ahead our peak load in operating reserves, which allows us some flexibility to monitor weather as we get closer in the summer period. Why buy for the entire month of June if it's forecast we're going to have rain for the next week? Can we pick up energy for the remainder of the month? Can we pick up just for tomorrow, the next day? That's what we did this summer when we could have gone out and bought for the whole period, but we chose not to do that. We bought blocks of about 100 megawatts and then played the rest on a monthly or daily basis. And so I foresee us doing that again this next summer, and I'll tell you about the position we're in next summer.
Now, let me ask you a question. You said you did 100 megawatts, but how many were outstanding that you were going to be picking up on a day-to-day basis?
It depended on what, so when you look at your planning reserves, there's a forecast in there that you will have generation outages. That is a potential. When you actually get into the day-to-day, if those generations, if there is no outage, that risk is reduced. So when you say how much we do day-to-day, we have had generator outages in the summer at times, not necessarily on our peak load days, which causes us to go out and buy megawatts for that occasion. This summer, when we peaked in July 19th, we were purchasing about 300 megawatts. Now, as I said, about 100 megawatts of that was based on the longer term purchases. We were able to procure additional amounts daily or balance of the month, or even real time to meet that load. I think
and when was that during this past summer?
it was July 19th. Yeah, so we had one generator go out over the peak hours. When it's hot, equipment can go bad too. I mean, it's not just freezing conditions. When it's extreme heat, you can have a small piece of equipment take out something as well. So that's how we managed it this summer. Looking forward in our LNR projection, what our LNR shows is us not running generation that was capable of running because we were adding new resources. So there's about 160 megawatts.
Not
of-
running the generation that is.
it is capable, and the purpose for that from the LNR perspective is we show other resources coming in. We show for 2023, we show a combustion turbine coming online in 2023, 228 megawatts. We show about 120 megawatts of solar and another 50 megawatts of battery coming on in 2023.
Is that combustion turbine in Texas footprint?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I think it's one that we don't talk about here.
That's what it's.
Yeah, okay.
We're not supposed to talk about cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's over. It's over.
And so we planned, but not only did we plan from the Newman 6 generator for 2023, as well as the 120 megawatt solar, 50 megawatt battery storage for the summer. We also had planned on a 50 megawatt standalone battery. We had 40 megawatts of Palo generation in that plan. And we had 75 megawatts capacity wise for 150 megawatt solar project. Capacity for us, solar provides about 50% effective capacity of our facility. So going in this summer, it looks like we need about 280 megawatts to meet planning reserve margin.
For summer 23.
23. So how do you meet that? We have the option of turning on older generation, 160 megawatts there. We're efforting not to do that. The preference would be to buy when you need and not run those resources around the clock. On top of that, we'll have to take the same approach. It's sort of it's an option for us, right? If we can't find megawatts to match that 160 megawatts, we may have to run those generators. They're not quick start. They're boiler type generators.
Once they're on, they stay on. It's a lot of
Yeah.
Waste and
Yeah,
expense.
they're older, so if you turn them on, turn them off, it might cause some other problem. So we will go out. The 80 megawatt projection to impact next year is still not an official projection for us. We asked our loads department to give us an estimate at this point of the year what they think will happen next year as far as loads. So we plan on managing that as we did this summer. And I think it worked out fine. If we have reason to believe that those resources may not be available through market information and things like that, that may change your approach. But I think for us, from a cost standpoint, we're not looking to go in and lock in the full 120 megawatts that we need.
Madam Chair? Yeah, a question on transmission. I know we got notification that, that we had a kind of a close shave this past summer.
Right.
And to get past that close shave,
Would you explain what you're referring to that conversation?
they had a couple days during the summer where it looked like they were going to maybe not be able to keep the lights on. And they ended up having to import power over a notoriously unreliable transmission line going east.
Which one was that?
So just a little background.
But the question I was getting to, give me the,
Can I get the background?
well, we're going to get it in just a second. Let me
No,
finish the.
what's the name of the line? That's what I want to know.
It's the Eddy County
That's
DC
what I
converter
was gonna ask.
that you're speaking about.
Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go
The
ahead.
Eddy County line. And so my question is, are there transmission investments that you can be looking at to help solve this resource adequacy stretch that we're facing?
There, yes. So a couple of things. The transmission investment that's going on now is to accommodate the resources that were planned for 2023, 2024. There's network upgrades necessary to bring in the solar and the battery storage projects that are going on now. We have transmission to accommodate load growth. When you talk about should we invest in transmission to bring in additional resources from our neighbors. There, you know, that transmission investment of that sort, when you look at it, you can read about projects in the newspaper that are around us. I won't mention them by name, but we're talking 600 megawatts. We're talking 1,000 megawatts of new transmission capability. And so when a utility our size is 2,200 megawatts, the investment in a 12 or 1,000 megawatt transmission line, you would say, I'm better off building locally than I am building this transmission. So the opportunity to participate in some of these projects and take advantage and help encourage, maybe plant the seeds for their growth is something we look at. And but it would be too much to put as one participant on our ratepayers.
I'd like to.
Sure.
Well, my understanding is that there's one, I think there's shared use or shared ownership, I'm not sure which, of that line. I know I can't remember the details now, but I know we had asked you, we had sent out bench requests and gotten answers back, but it didn't really get to the point of how the line's use was going to be developed in the future. The impression I got from looking at the bench request answers was that neither El Paso Electric nor Southwest Power Service, I guess the line is owned by one entity and used by the other, and I forget which is which.
It's talking maybe the Eddy County DC
Yes,
type.
yes.
So PNM and El Paso Electric are, El Paso Electric owns 2/3 of the DC converter station. It's good for 200 megawatts when fully operational and running. And the line itself is also a 2/3, 1/3 ownership from Eddy County into Alamogordo, say, into our system as well.
Okay, 1/3. That's the 1/3.
PNM has the
PNM is the 1/3 in that section, and El Paso Electric is 2/3.
Yeah.
And then going east from that point, it's all owned by PNM.
If you're going east from the Eddy DC converter, it's SPS.
Oh, SPS.
So it connects the I always forget. I always refer to it as Southwest Power Pole, but I think it's changed its name. So it connects the WEC, the Western Interconnection, with Eastern Interconnection.
So my question from looking at, and you may have had more of that, recent conversations or back and forth in the meetings that have been held, the bi-weekly meetings, but it seemed to me from the answers to the bunch requests that there were no real firm plans to upgrade that line, which looked like it might be a good candidate for addressing short-term resource adequacy issues.
Yes, I think it depends on, and I don't know when that request went out, but what has happened with El Paso's share of that transmission line? Those rights on those transmission lines are now owned by Tucson Electric Company. Tucson Electric Company built a wind farm on that line and has purchased El Paso Electric's rights to move power through the
When did
system.
that happen?
I believe it's 2020, and then maybe the test around that time frame, 2020, 2021 time period is when that went commercial. And so when we say replacing that converter, if you want to replace it with the like amount of megawatts, there are additional transmission upgrades that need to happen. So what we are, I guess I need to be careful about putting out public transmission information that's not already out there, but we are looking at the Eddy tie, and is there anything that we can do to increase the capability of that line into our system to our customers?
For the short term, you're looking for it in light of your possible needs for resource adequacy in the shorter
So
term?
in the shorter term,
What time frame is that?
to upgrade,
Yeah,
begin that type of project, transmission upgrades, if you were to plan to do that now, ordering equipment, same issues, there's transformers involved and everything. I think we're thinking 2025, 2026.
Yeah. Thank you. After, is that, what's going on with that? Just
With
the Afton transmission lines,
is this the South Line project?
South Line, yeah.
No, I don't know that I can say what they haven't put out there. Look at the smart one. I don't know how much we are not a participant.
Nothing given it, we could talk about that provides capabilities for EPP.
Not in 23, 2024. I think you would be able to see if you drive those routes and those paths, you would start to see construction taking place if anything was going to be available as a resource to us in the next year.
Yeah, I understand there was a transfer on the Arizona side to, was it
It was the Tucson.
Tucson of a segment, but similar transfers in funding haven't materialized on the next.
What was the last part of what you said?
There was a transfer. There was of the project itself, a transfer of a certain segment on the Arizona side. I think it's Tucson. That Tucson Electric would have a purchase or something, and similar activity has not happened on the New Mexico. On the New Mexico side.
I will say that the owners of the South Line Development Project are actively, it hasn't slowed down their activity. They are taking, I think, charge the most I can say.
Yeah, okay. And we didn't really ask these questions of P&M, but you know, the same stuff applies on transmission. And I guess as we go forward, I'll be asking more questions. What's happening on the transmission side and how does it impact these resource adequacy issues? And is there some focus that we should share, making things happen that help solve the problem?
Commissioner Fishman, there might be an opportunity for a further workshop to focus on the transmission and the federal overlay. I mean, such, the questions that Chairman Hall is asking, when we have a federal tariff that controls and we have open access requirements, and if generators come in and they build, and we can't reserve transmission. I mean, it has, there's all sorts of federal rules that apply. So maybe there's further opportunity to bring some, experts.
I think that's a terrific idea.
On the federal, well, it wasn't my idea, but it would probably.
We'll give you credit for that.
Yeah. Now you're doing it.
But there could be some opportunity there.
Okay.
Great. That would be helpful. You too, right? You agree, and you're bringing in saying that is wonderful.
Yeah.
And that brings to mind something I have often wished I could get, and maybe this is the right place to say it, is a map that shows, a current map that shows the transmission lines in the state. And not just one utility, like I have like a PNM map from 2015 or something. That's the most recent one I've seen. And it actually does contain a number of other lines that belong to other utilities, I guess, at least insofar as they connect with PNM lines. I don't know if that's the totality of the lines going on. And certainly since then, we've had many, other projects developed, more lines developed. It's so out of date. Did you guys ever think about collaboratively keeping an updated map, maybe online?
Well, we do produce a 10-year system expansion plan for transmission. And that is online. It's a public document. Yeah. It's on our website. It's a public document. I believe there are current maps on there as well.
But that's a plan for the future. I'm talking about what's on the ground right now.
Yeah, so it's existing plus what's planned to go along. We do have current updated maps.
And that's your system, and
That's our system.
yeah. I mean, maybe it's too much of an ask to get all 3 IOUs to put it all on one map. Somebody, maybe in the state government, I don't know. I don't know if anything would be helpful to you guys. Probably
Seems
not.
like something that should be able to.
Wet thing?
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, good.
It should be available.
Great, thank you. All right, well,
I'm wondering, Anastasia, were you gonna come in with some more questions? PPE is sort of your territory.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman, Madam Chair. Given the pending cases and imminent cases, I think I'll say nothing more, but that we would be interested in another workshop on transmission. Thank you.
thank you, Anastasia. I appreciate your interest in the transmission matter. Thank you.
And Anastasia, on your earlier comments, without mentioning specific cases, there is this tension between process and acting timely. And, you know, there's a couple dockets out there where we're kind of debating those issues now. But I heard you loud and clear, and I think, you know, all parties do things to help speed the process. PRC as well as utilities. And so hopefully as part of these documents, we'll have some constructive discussion around that and be able to do better in the future about being both timely and thorough in terms of process. So your concerns were, I heard them. So just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Thank you. I've sort of noticed that with the 3 hours, that at least 3 hours that have been spent in 3 open meetings.
Okay, all right, so thanks very much. I really appreciate your information. So now we'll go to SPS. Hello. See you again, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. So for this section of the agenda, you know, I don't have as detailed prepared remarks around some of our process, given the capacity position that we find ourselves in the next few years, but certainly open to questions. And I might just offer a couple of comments on the transmission topic, since we recently had that. You know, we did have some discussions in my prior life in Colorado about the ability of increased transmission investment or interconnections to solve capacity needs. And I think a general conclusion that I would offer is you still need a firm generation resource available on the other side of a transmission straw, if you will, right? So if we're going to build transmission into other areas, you know, we still need a firm resource to generate, to bring additional generation to load. So just a consideration there. Obviously, the DC ties in New Mexico do have an interplay with utilities in this state. In the SPP, that transmission conversation is a little different. There's more probably resource availability within the pool than there would be building across DC ties. But just from SPS's perspective, you know, the DC ties are considered, and we have seen emergency sales in PSCO's past that have come, you know, from one side to the other. So even from our perspective, being in the pool, you know, a conversation about the availability of reservations across the ties is meaningful, but you still need the generation on the other side, right? So if you have a 300 megawatt generation need and 100 megawatts of capacity across the DC tie, we're going to be limited by the capacity of the straw, right? But let's not look at transmission as a solution. It's really transmission plus whatever on the other side. So, but I'll stop there. If there's questions for SPS on some of these matters, some of the questions in this section of the agenda were more near-term actions. So if you don't mind, I'll just turn it over to you. If you have questions for us.
Yes, go ahead.
Well,
I'm saying yes because of you.
you guys are awash in, you're awash in capacity for the next couple of years. Maybe you're in a position to make a good profit on it. I hope so.
Well, I think there's been some discussion today about planning horizons. So, you know, when we look at an L&R table, this is generally a long-term process,
Yep.
right? We still have medium-term operational needs to plan around. And then, of course, we have real-time operations. So these are capacity positions, assuming the available resources on the system. But generators have outages, right? Planned outages. We do maintenance. Load can fluctuate, right? There's medium-term considerations that come into play that are going to move those numbers from day to day or from season to season. And then another thing that I mentioned earlier that we watch is the load. And we are, like El Paso, experiencing significant amount of load increases on our system. So I wouldn't say we're awash because if, you know, that load continues or it changes the trajectory, you know, that can change the capacity position very quickly.
And I had a question about that. I noticed that for 2022, you had much more excess capacity than you did for 2023. And, you know, I guess you can make a draw a line with 2 points, but I wondered, you know, if just looking at that inspired you to be thinking about, well, you do have plans for extra capacity in the future. So, but I could imagine that might create a little vulnerability if, you know, in the very next year after. Wait, I'm saying 22 and 23. I mean 23 and 24. I think was the data you showed us. I can't remember the years, but there, you know, there was a less comfortable margin in the latter year of those two.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And that's reflective of our load.
Yeah.
So we do see tremendous oil and gas load in our service territory, and that is increasing. That's, you know, definitely impacted by other economic factors, but we do see gas processing plus drilling requests, and that oil and gas load is real and increasing on our system. So these figures here in the L&R table that I presented reflect over 55 megawatts of load just from our oil and gas coming online in 2023 and close to 100 additional megawatts in 2024. So, you know, we're talking about, in some instances, the size of power plants, right, coming on annually on our system from a customer function or customer process. And that's before, you know, any economic development load that might show up in a jurisdiction or other load. For example, you had a significant conversation about interruptible rates and interruptible programs there. Even though we're a little bit farther out in some of this planning, we're looking at things like crypto load, crypto mining. If that were to become material in our service territory, you know, what's the potential for interruptible rates there? I offer that just as an example of something, right? But you can imagine that there's a different consideration there potentially due to the nature of their service.
Are there any significant plant closures or decommissioning
Retirements.
that are influencing that load as you go past 2024? I know
Well, let
there's
me-
been water and coal plant issues.
Right. I think you're just asking about planned retirements.
Planned retirements,
So I'll have to speak a little bit from memory, so don't hold me to exact dates, but this L&R table does assume certain retirements in 2023. And so you also have filings from SPS this fall, you know, forthcoming that will share some more information, but we are planning to retire consistent with other filings that the company has made about 200 megawatts in 2023. So that's reflected here in these numbers. We don't have material retirements in 24, but by the later years in the 2020s, the 27, 28, 29 timeframe, we do have planned natural gas retirements. So in addition to our load increasing with firm capacity retiring, that is creating the resource need later in the decade.
So, but you may have some wiggle room by delaying closures if you do run into problems.
Possibly.
Part of what's going on there.
Depending on, the unit and the health of the unit, the remaining starts, I would say, there's certainly some newer units on SPS's system. Hale and Sagamore are the newer wind facilities. Our Jones station, just north of Lubbock, is a relatively new addition to the system, but a lot of our other gas is quite old. And so when we talk about extensions, there may be limited opportunity for extension, but that's a balance and a conversation that we have with the commission on, for example, what additional capital might be required to extend the life of a unit.
Anything else?
No, I think. Mr. Bird? Mr. Maestas, Vice Chair Maestas? Any other thoughts?
Not right now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thanks again.
All right, thanks so much. I appreciate your time. So, going back to the agenda, honestly, it looks like we covered practically everything on this list. Maybe a few points, not precisely. But I believe that we're within 15 minutes of the end of this meeting. We do have items, and I'm not sure if we've actually, I believe we did cover this, at least with PNM, IOU overview of emergency curtailment plans. Did we cover that with the other utilities?
Not so much, but I think all the issues got surfaced.
That's what I think too.
EPE, anything? Oh, yeah, come on up. She's, your partner's abandoned you now. She won't come up with.
I'm liable to say anything now. No, it's, we're not projecting the need to implement anything. That threat always exists as a utility. We do have load curtailment procedures if necessary. They're automated through our EMS system. We obviously look at loads that what we would call maybe, I don't know, for us, what you would call non-critical loads, and you rotate those. That's just part of our plan that we always have.
But, there it occurs to me that your meters do have some time capabilities. Got it.
That's right.
I'll come up because I talked with Rico about this.
We got her.
This morning.
Even without AMI, your meters do capture time. I think they can capture 3 times if my memory's correct, or 3 time periods during the day. So I'm wondering, I may be wrong on that.
I'm not sure that's accurate.
Okay. But I know that you do have some residential customers that are on. Not very many.
Not enough, I
Not
would
enough.
say.
Yeah.
They are on time of use rates with the current. So, I'm wondering if emergency curtailment with residences is an option that you could pursue more aggressively than, say, PNM, if it was necessary. And if that's something that.
Excuse me for interrupting. So it's my understanding that a lot of the curtailment plan that PNM has put into place with the social media and the different methodologies, they've got a very detailed plan. EPE has program in place for customer notifications. I don't think it's as detailed as B&M's is at this point, but that also the customer specific curtailment, what I have been told, will be closer to that when we do get the AMI meters in. So I do think it's going to take the meter change. Is what I've heard. To the advanced meters, to be able to be more customer specific with the curtailments and the notifications and the communication systems.
Well, I'm not quite sure where to follow up. You don't have an expert with you on that today.
We didn't bring anyone
That's okay.
with us today.
That's right. We can always, send you an inquiry and get a little more info. But that's something that might be worth following up on. Your 200 megawatts short of where you'd like to be in terms of having a safe cushion, operating cushion. And, I think the mission would like to.
I think the 200, I think he was speaking planning, not operating.
On the planning. reserve.
Yeah, on the planning.
Yeah, and how we manage that is, I guess, your question.
Yeah, the planning.
Yeah.
So we might want to get a little more information on that. Again, just in case something happens. And again, we had a close call this one. So worth it.
Yeah, I think AMI is best thing since sliced bread, right? I mean, I just think it's it seems like a tool that can be really, really helpful. In emergency situations and non-emergency situations, be able to manage flow out there. Encourage conservation.
Yeah, and we do have that pending. It's a pending right now.
So good. Okay. That's it. So, thank you for telling me that. All right. I don't have any other questions. Let me see. We have, IOU next and commissioner next steps. All right. Whoever wrote this agenda.
Well, it sounds
that's what
like,
they want in this point.
yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it sounds like we'll do a follow-up. If all folks are agreeable, following up on transmission and what its impacts might be on this whole picture. I think that is a great suggestion. So maybe we'll solicit some of your input on what might be good to cover during that meeting, and maybe come up with a better organized agenda than this one. So I welcome from all the utilities any input you guys have. And we might conduct a workshop on that. And
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think this has been very helpful. One question that was in my mind is the fact that we have very few interveners, and I don't know if that's because this is during the workday. And if anybody has any thoughts on that, please send us an email or something, because I think if we get the more heads we have thinking about the issues and the more people present to make comments, I think the better result we get, the better input we get. And I will certainly try to give more lead time next time in noticing this kind of a workshop so people can plan. But in other workshops we've had related to our rate makings, we've had tremendous participation, but those were very first focused on the development of rules, which of course, really means a lot to entities that are going to be subject to the rules. And we had lots of interveners who want to see rules go a certain way. But this is a different kind of a workshop than that. And I'm sort of not sure why we don't have as many interveners here as I was expecting to see, but if if anybody thinks it has to do with the time of day, please let me know. We could possibly schedule this a little later in the afternoon or something. You know, I hate to ask people to stay late after their work hours, but maybe some people can't come during their work hours. I don't know if that makes sense. But in any case, whatever suggestions you may have that would bring people in who are interested in transmission, please let us know.
And just one other comment is, as things develop for you guys as utilities, we can move faster earlier than we get a hint of what's coming down the road. And again, we've had a couple things that have come up in front of us where that's become an issue. I can't speak for any other commission or any other commissioners. All I can do is speak for myself, and I think this commission, which is that when you get the information to us early, we will respond responsibly. We're not going to turn it in. We're not trying to turn it into obstacles. We'll try and turn it into solutions. I'm really proud of this commission because I think that's the attitude in these commissioners. So I just encourage you to do that. And that'll enable us to set up things so things can get resolved timely and quickly, and everybody gets the most benefit. So.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Vicente.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone that came out to our workshop this afternoon. We have staff members here. I'd like to thank them. First is Miguel. He's the one that works with the audio system. We have Patrick. He's our new chief press information officer. Patrick, want to raise your hand? And Jack Sidler, he's from the utility division. Is there any other staff members from our agency?
Yes, that's Simon Lofa.
Great. Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. And does anybody want to come up and make a last minute comment, something that we left out of the process this afternoon? Anybody want to volunteer that you want to just express your comment to the commissioners? No one out there. Okay. So as Chairperson Hall indicated, there's a possibility of another workshop down the road. But all in all, I think this was a good information gathering. And most importantly, when I hear directly from the utility companies, it's very meaningful. It makes me think about what we need to do at the commission, how we need to make adjustments, how I can work with my colleagues. That's what I'm thinking about. So thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. That really captures a lot of my feelings about this meeting as well. So our next agenda item is public comments. I think we took care of those at the beginning. So our last agenda item is adjournment. And unless anybody has anything.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just also wanted to, thank everyone for participating. It's obvious we're all in the same boat. We're facing some unprecedented global challenges, consequences of a global pandemic, a long residual impact of supply chain issues, a potential realignment of our global economy. And I think what's clear here is that forums like this that are a little more informal give us an opportunity to really explore some of these issues together and really work cooperatively. I just really noticed a sentiment of cooperation. I don't know if it's because we're all in the same boat or because we're lame duck commissioners. But I'm just, I'm very encouraged and I'm proud of all of my colleagues here for leaning into the finish line tape to do as much as we can for the incoming commissioners. these are unprecedented problems, and let's not forget in conclusion, Madam Chair and members of the commission, we have many ratepayers out there that are low income, they're homebound, they have health issues that force them to rely on medical equipment that requires continuous electric power. And so we always need to be mindful of those less fortunate ratepayers as we navigate through these uncharted waters. So anyway, Madam Chair, thank you for presiding. Commissioner Fishman, thank you for your leadership in putting this together. I promise I will be more present. I'm not quite 100% as you all know, but hopefully by next week, I'll be close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Maestas. I think it's way above and beyond the call of duty for you to be present today. I wish you speedy recovery, but don't speed it too much. You need to get recovered so we can do the last sprint here in the next 4 months. But thank you for those comments. So with that, we're adjourned.